Hello and welcome to Simonside Country Fair in Northumberland. We're not too far from Rothbury and Morpeth, and I have to say, when the day started out, it was a bit wetter than this. I would normally take a photo, but really it doesn't do it justice. Up early for Simonside Fair, the car all packed, and well, it's a bit of a monsoon. This should be interesting. But nonetheless, the weather has cleared up and we are here talking to the public about archaeology and history and having a great time. But today I want to share with you something a bit special actually. Just over here, next door, we have a Viking woodworker. In fact, actually just over here, we have some alpacas. That's really quite cool. But just, just over here, we have a Viking woodworker, Rowan. And Rowan is an interesting reenactor and woodworker using traditional methods and tools, in this instance to create a spoon. So I figured I'd share some of that process. It's based on the archaeology that I'm very familiar with at the Viking Centre in Coppergate in York, and he is fantastic. So check him out.
Hey, I am Askani Elrison. I am a woodworker from Jorvik, from Coppergate, and I am carving a spoon out of some birch which came from just over the hill there yonder. And the reason it's this shape is because the grain of the wood is here, and I want it to follow that line, so it gives me a stronger spoon, so it doesn't snap when I tap somebody on the head with it for being just annoying, you know. This is a sort of a generic early medieval spoon, and it's going to fit into the wood like that. So at the minute I'm using the axe, really ubiquitous tool from the period to carve with, and about 80% of spoon carving is done with the axe. In fact, about 80% of all Viking woodworking is done with an axe. Pretty much everything you see around has been carved with an axe. Table here was a tree once upon a time, felled with an axe, shaped with an axe, and all done there.
So these other tools here, are these also period accurate then?
Yep. This is I can't remember which typology. It's a Peterson type B, I think. Don't hold me to it. It's probably an A. This is a T-adze, and it's used for flattening for timber like this, giving it a nice finish. And the reason it's this shape is to save metal. Metal is a really quite important commodity in the period. So the body here is iron, pure iron. And you can see here, there's basically 3 bits of metal. This is what's called fire welding. And this head has been forged out of iron and then fire welded onto this bit of steel here. In the Viking period, actually only this bit here would actually be steel, but this blacksmith obviously had quite a bit of steel, so he's made this whole T out of the steel and then fire welded it together. Yeah, these are all, this particularly fine piece of blacksmithing is a copy of a saw from Mastermeyer in Sweden. It was somebody lost their toolbox in a bog, not unlike that toolbox down there. It was full of all these woodworking tools and blacksmithing tools, and this was one of 2 saws that were found in it. It's a very aggressive set for a wood saw, and this was all hand forged out by a blacksmith friend of mine.
So how did they achieve the teeth then? Well,
these are actually, you forge out the bar and then you use a metal chisel to cut the teeth. Not unlike, well, this is a woodworking chisel, but a metalworking chisel is not unlike it, and you actually knock in the teeth with the chisel, and then using a file, I filed the teeth so they were sharp, and then set them so they're slightly wider than the blade, because if they were the same width as the blade, it wouldn't actually go through the wood.
Interesting. And so how often did these sorts of tools need to be resharpened?
Ideally, after each use, the saw, it's sort of, because it's got quite an aggressive sharpening to it. It's about once a month. This gets the edge redone on it. But these chisels, I will sharpen after every use. Well, I will hone them with on my belt here. I have a hone, and after every time I use the knife, I will wet the stone slightly. I'll just give it a bit of a sweep. There's a saying in modern woodworking, and it was probably in Viking woodworking, is that you hone often and you sharpen less. Because sharpening is quite intensive with this chisel.
So honing almost being a form of polishing, I take it.
Yeah, it's a very light sharpening, really. It's a proper sharpening to a woodworker is actually taking a blunt tool and putting an edge on it.
Yeah.
Whereas honing is maintaining an edge.
So forgive me for this, but presumably a key part of this is trying to avoid accidents. Not too many accidents hopefully happen here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this one's due for a sharpen. But yeah, if I was to, like, if I missed a bit of wood, hit the block, there's lots of debris and stuff and bits in the bark which sort of slowly dull it. So it's not great. But yeah, if I was to, like, it's not so much a problem in them periods, because why the heck would you be putting a nail in a tree? But you find now a nail buried somewhere deep in the wood, and you hit it and you get a really blunt axe. Yeah, the biggest problem for a Viking woodworker would actually be with bigger bits of timber. You actually, to get them out of the forest, you would use, maybe a horse, probably oxen, and you drag them. And you have to drag them through the mud, and bark is great for a nice bit of. Here we are. Actually, that's not the best. But there's lots of little crevices and stuff in wood, which is great for getting lots and lots of, dirt, rubbish, and just stuff. And they're basically micro abrasives. So a really common tool for a Viking woodworker is this. And this is for basically stripping the bark off. It's not going to work, is it?
There we go. So these materials I certainly recognise from when I worked at Jorvik, and you were saying before that you're trying to be sort of Coppergate accurate. I'm trying to, because Coppergate was such a hub for woodworkers, so to speak. You know, 3 or 4 buildings that were just full of woodworking in Cupmakers Street.
Cupmakers Street, literally the Cuppergata, Cupmakers Street. So when I started out, I kind of like based all my stuff, was fascinated with Coppergate. And, I mean, it sort of broadened out slightly because backstory to my character, so to speak, is a journeyman, travelling woodworker, because kind of explains how somebody so young would know so much about woodworkers because they've done lots, been to lots of places. Also explains why I have like a tool from Sweden.
Well, actually, on that note, then, in terms of age, I was having a conversation with someone who digs at Bamborough a lot.
Oh, Bamborough,
and they were talking about how, especially, for example, in the realm of metalwork and pottery, by the time you reach the age of, say, 20, you're probably at your peak, because your eyesight then starts to go as well. So you become is there a similar sort of age limit on woodworking, or is it could you be better for longer?
There's a progression. You'd probably start out as a young teenager. As a sort of apprentice. You'd be around the shop, you'd probably be blanking out spoons. You'd be doing the rough one, the stuff that the master couldn't be bothered to do.
So kind of like masonry in that sense. You do the rough blanks for someone else to.
You'd be splitting the logs, you'd be clearing the bark off, you'd be learning your trade from the bottom up. You'd be doing that until you probably about 18, 20, by which point you've done 4-6 years of
And
you know,
thousands of those. Yeah.
The apprenticeship is usually about 7 years. So, I mean, I'm 26 now. I would be not a master of my craft, but I'd be a well-professioned individual by this point. I would have travelled around, I would have learnt a lot. I'd probably have an apprentice of my own by this point. A master would probably be in his 30s or 40s.
Okay.
You know, life expectancy isn't as long in this period.
No.
But masters tend not to actually do a lot of work. They tend to point at things and tell you what to do.
Yeah. The one final question then. Again, with this conversation I was having last night, it was a lovely conversation. We had fantastic wine and chocolate cake. But during the conversation, one of the things that came up was this idea of people who have particular skills. Not being able to sort of transfer those skills to other materials, and that's why you get, for example, maybe in a carpenter's house, maybe a slightly badly made comb. It's because they wouldn't necessarily, they know how to work wood, but it's not quite the same as bone, but it's close enough. And so in that sense, have you tried branching out into other materials, and what's that like?
I try my hand at everything to give it a go, so I can understand how it's made, so I can talk to people about how it's made. And as you say, bone, this belt buckle here is a copy of the one from Coppergate that's been dyed with verdigris, and I made this. It's out of this was cow bone. My previous version was antler, and for me, antler is actually a lot like really slow-grown oak. It's got a grain, it's got a structure, it's really tough, but you can work it. And I have done bone working. Well, this is antler. This is my cloak pin, axe-headed cloak pin, and I made this with.
I like that actually. It's like a Dane axe.
It's great, isn't it? This was done with a hacksaw, period hacksaw, a very small axe, and my woodworking knife.
Well, and actually also in that sense as well. Again, because I lived amongst this stuff day in, day out for a few years, I remember at Jorvik there's a hacksaw blade, isn't there? But do you think that would have been made in a similar way to the larger saw we just saw?
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
But with a smaller chisel, smaller set.
Yeah.
That hacksaw would probably be easier to make than a woodwork saw, because you need bigger to let the chip out, and you need the tolerances are bigger but smaller all at once. With a hacksaw, it's lots of little. You can very easily make a hacksaw blade by yourself. Really, with just a file, you can just. A hacksaw would have been almost made exactly the same.
Cool. Well, as another pun, I'll file that tip away for later. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And also, one final thing. I love these tent pegs that you've got.
Well, that's going to be a whisk, actually.
Oh, that's a whisk. Okay, cool.
It's finer.
Yeah. But I'll just show the people at home. Just down here, there's some tent pegs on the floor, which are just magnificent. There we go. And they are the tops of Christmas trees, basically. Fascinating. And
found in a glacier near Lillehammer.
Found in a glacier near Lillehammer.
Yes.
All of them.
all one of them.
Excellent. Again, thank you very much. Thank you. So there you go. A little insight into period woodworking technology, and also a tent peg technology from the Viking world. A little gem from the Simonside Country Fair that I simply had to share with you. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.